Hi there. Today we're going to be talking about one of the biggest issues facing young people and their parents.
At-risk behaviour. And by at-risk we mean drug addiction, alcohol use and other activities which put our young people at risk.
But we're not talking all doom and gloom. What we're talking is about what we can all do to help young people build their resilience so that they make good choices.
Later on in the show, we're going to hear some amazing stories about communities who've banded together to give their young people a sense of belonging, a sense of their own mastery and independence in their lives. They've even helped them to find the spirit of generosity for others.
For some young people, having just one person who believes in them can help them swing their whole lives around. And that person could be you or me.
But just what can we do? First off, let's just explore the word addiction and what it means.
It's such an overused term these days. We talk about people being addicted to work, to sport, to coffee, to food. What's wrong with that?
Jonathan Duffy caught up with Hugh McKay, a social researcher and author.
Hugh, we often talk about being addicted to work or to food or to sport, but what is addiction?
Obviously there are addictive personalities, and sometimes that's a question of body chemistry which needs management, and that explains some drug and alcohol addictions, but more generally psychological addiction seems to me to be the ultimate escape. People who describe themselves as workaholics are really admitting that there are areas of their lives, often personal relationships, intimacy, where they just don't want to go. Maybe they're frightened, maybe they've had bad experiences, but immersing themselves in an addiction to work is for them the ultimate escape. And that applies whether it's an addiction to falling in love. Some people just want to live on a constant 2-year cycle of a new romance, then a new one, then a new one. Other people are addicted to food or obviously to drugs, and some people are addicted to reading, some are addicted to writing, some are addicted to jogging. Often what you find is where a reasonably healthy pursuit becomes extreme, becomes obsessive, compulsive, and slips over into the area of true addiction, what you're looking at is a person who is somehow shying away from the mystery at the centre of their lives. They don't want to face questions about the meaning, the purpose of their lives, and so they look for anything to distract them, and they find something, which might be cooking or learning a new language or jogging or drugs, and that so preoccupies them that they literally become addicted to it, and then they don't have to confront these other questions. So addiction is really the ultimate avoidance strategy.
What is the difference between having a regular habit and being addicted?
There's a huge difference between a habit, a ritual, regular activity like eating 3 meals a day or going for a run every morning, or even drinking alcohol in moderation, but regularly. There's all the difference in the world between regular habits that help to mark our lives and to sustain us and give us some kind of discipline and routine and ritual. That's very different from addiction. And the difference is that addiction becomes something you can't help because you've adopted it as your strategy for staying away from life's big questions. There are plenty of people who are regular joggers or have other habits of life which provide some stability in their lives, who also are perfectly happy to confront big questions.
We are addicted when we can't control our usage and it's in control of us. Now, while it may offer a convenient escape from reality, addiction is harmful both to ourselves and to those we love. And that's when we have to turn to someone else to help us break the cycle of dependence and to restore health and happiness.
How do we know just who is at risk? And what are the factors that drive young people to these at-risk behaviours? Because if we know what causes the problem, then we're in a much better position to protect our young people. Psychologist and author Andrew Fuller has been around Australia visiting school groups. His focus has been the well-being of our young people and their families.
With young people that are attempting at-risk behaviours, particularly substance abuse, we find three major categories. There's experimenters, there's the socially disconnected, and there's the self-medicators. For the experimenters, by and large, there's probably not that much that we can do. We want to make sure that they don't experiment too early, because we know that early initiation of drug use becomes a major problem. There is also some convincing research that suggests that cigarette use and early alcohol use are predictive of later substance abuse, so they are indeed gateway drugs. We know that early alcohol drug use really interferes with the myelination that occurs in the brain during late childhood and early adolescence, and that's why we really want to offset major binge drinking until at least sort of the middle to later adolescent years. So the laws on alcohol being prohibited from young kids, it makes good sense. We also know that permissive attitudes in the family towards involving children in the parents' substance abuse becomes a problem. So, you know, the kind of father that says, just pass me a can of beer just grab me a can of beer as you're passing the fridge, really is a problem. Or, you know, just driving to the bottle shop and saying, I'll have a slab for me and one for the baby in the back. That's the sort of stuff we really don't want to have kids doing. So we really want families to realise if you're going to use alcohol, if you're going to use drugs, try to keep it separate from your kids. The other thing that we know in terms of families and risk-taking is that rituals in families are strongly protective. And by rituals, we don't mean the big expensive holidays, but we mean the kind of things that characterise what a family does, the sorts of things that later on in kids in a family will say, Mum and Dad always made sure we did this. You know, it might be the Friday night pizza, it might be the Sunday night movie, it might be church, it might be youth club, it might be anything really, but it's those small events and those little rituals that families get involved in act a bit like the coat hooks upon which people can hang the good memories of their lives, and they're powerfully protective against major substance abuse. The socially disconnected young people are those that don't feel popular and use drugs as a means to increase their social circle. And in many ways, they in a community are the most preventable group, because if we can help young people to have a diversity of friendship groups, you know, that they've got one group over here and another one there, perhaps some in school, some out of school, then they really are quite strongly protective, because it really is those that lock in just on the other substance abusing peers that get into all sorts of strife and trouble. The self-medicating young people are those that use drugs in order to really cover up emotional problems. And indeed, if I think about all of the work I've done with people who really get addicted, this is the big group. These are people who essentially feel vulnerable, they feel attacked by the world or overloaded by emotional sensation, and they almost use the drugs as a sort of screen. They screen out their own sensation world. And if you think about it, heroin, marijuana and extreme alcohol abuse are all very effective ways of dulling down your feelings. Marijuana, of course, is also a short-term antidepressant. It has very negative outcomes, but one of the positive effects for young people that use it is it lifts their feelings. So it's not surprising that it becomes a fairly inviting thing for somebody who's feeling depressed or forlorn about their lives.
Some factors that put young people at risk include poor self-worth, poverty, academic failure, family problems and conflict, a family history of drug and alcohol abuse, lack of community spirit, peer group acceptance and conformity, a wish to alter their psychological state, and availability of the substance. And if they can't control their usage of the substance, they become addicted. Helen and Tracy agreed to tell us their story on how they became addicted and how they managed to pull out of it.
As a teenager, I started experimenting with drugs. I became unhappy, I guess, and didn't know how to talk about how I was feeling. I was very confused. Things at home weren't good between my parents, and I guess I was confused and didn't know how to discuss it with anybody, or that you could discuss your feelings with anyone. So I started experimenting with drugs really as a way to fill the hole that was emerging in my life at home. And then at age 17 became addicted to heroin, and it was all downhill from there. So I then spent till I was 31 using heroin, and spent 8 years in prison as a result of drug charges. So, and as I was going to prison, I accidentally fell pregnant. So by the time I was sentenced, I'd given birth to a little girl, Ali, my daughter. And I guess for me, the meaning of a prison sentence was about losing my baby. It was the first worthwhile thing I felt I'd done since being a teenager. I really embraced being her mum. And by going to prison, it was going to be taken away from me. So in those days, in 1980, you were allowed to keep your baby until the age of 1 in the women's prison. So I fought that ruling, I guess, and it was eventually changed, and she was allowed to live with me indefinitely. So of the 8 years, we were in the prison together for 4 years. And it was really around the separation time after my daughter had left the prison. The issue for me that started to change things around was that I had to choose between killing myself or living. And it really, at that point, there was, I was suicidal for quite a long time, and I just couldn't see any hope for the future. But I guess my one hope was that in 4 years' time, I could be a mum to my daughter again. Without that hope, I don't know if I would have found the strength to actually dig my way out of that hole. It's very, very deprived and brutal in prison. It's the women that I was in prison with were wonderful, they were beautiful, and they probably kept me going a lot. A man who was my music teacher would come in weekly and talk to me, and he was a Buddhist. And he gave me some techniques to use that I guess I sort of had a blind faith initially that if I just keep doing these things every day, I'd exercise in the morning, I decided I wouldn't let the prison officers ever wake me up again. There were little things that in a prison environment I could take control of. So I would get up at 5:15 every morning, so to avoid them waking me up, and I would get on this exercise bike. So I could get my body a bit fitter. I learned to meditate. And Greg, the Buddhist man, taught me some little exercises that could help me at least feel closer to my daughter, even though I couldn't be with her. So probably having a bit of a spiritual awakening gave me some, when I didn't know what to have faith in and I didn't believe in myself, and my brother was supportive of me, but he'd had enough too, I just had to have blind faith that if I kept doing these things, things would get better. And they did.
I started drinking when I was about 19. It was because of peer pressure and friends. The friends that I did hang around with then. And then a few years later, I met Pastor Davies, and we were talking, and he said that he had faith in me and that I can get well. And so by the time I was 23, I was full-blown alcoholic. I just drank every day, and just drank anywhere and everywhere. And then I moved away thinking that I could fix the problem, but it didn't work. Alcohol came with me, and that it was then when I was around about 25, I finally hit my rock bottom, and I came to realise that I was an alcoholic. And when I was 26, I was drinking around in the parks, and I decided that day that I was going to get well. And I walked away from those people that I was drinking with in the park, and I just heard this strong voice in my head that I still had a friend out there that believed in me and that I can get well, and that friend was Pastor Davies. And I ended up reaching out for help and admitting that I was an alcoholic, and I went to a rehab and got well. And Pastor Davies was the first person that I rang from that rehab and letting him know that I was in there. And from that day onwards, I never had a drink, and that was 13 years ago, March the 21st, 1990. And I've been, my sobriety is just built from there, and hopefully one day at a time I'll stay sober. It was by the grace of God and by my friends that I have around me to support me, and Alcoholics Anonymous.
Resilience is a measure of how well we cope with major life stressors. such as an addiction. If we can build resilience in our young people, we can help them to be better able to make good choices when it comes to at-risk behaviour. And we can help them to prevent or pull out of behaviours which are out of control.
That's right, but how do we build resilience? Well, Larry Brentro, founder of Reclaiming Youth International, has extensive experience in helping bridge the gaps for young people.
Larry, a lot is said about building resilience in young people so that they don't fall into the trap of at-risk behaviours. But what exactly is resilience?
Well, the idea of resilience originally came from studying children who surmounted terrifically bad family or environmental backgrounds, and these were called resilient kids. The more we've looked at it, the more clear it becomes that resilience is something that in some degree all of us possess. I mean, we're all survivors. And so a resilient person is able to bounce back from challenges, even learn from crisis events, and surmount difficult problems. But it's not just a trait of personality, because what we know are two things contribute to resilient outcomes, to being able to survive the challenges of life. One, there are certain kinds of personal strengths, such as the ability to connect to other people, the ability to solve problems, the feeling that you're in charge of your own life, okay, concern for other people, those personal characteristics. But the others are social supports. That would mean creating environments where kids have role models, where they have opportunities to learn, where they have opportunities to serve. So by putting together, by developing the inner strengths of young people and providing the external supports, we help all young people become resilient.
Are there sort of positive tips that you would give to a society that was interested in building resilient youth?
Yes, I think, for example, children need multiple caring adults in their lives, but that's sort of been lost as we go to a more mobile, secular, depersonalized society. They need adults, who nurture them, who believe in them. They need something to be interested in, something to get excited about and committed. And sometimes our schools are not very, exciting places. They need to be given practice in responsibility and making decisions of their own. Just obedience training isn't going to do it. And then finally, they need opportunities to care and to give and to serve.
So Larry, if I understand resilience correctly, it's about equipping children with skills so that they can become strong, effective, productive adults.
Absolutely. And at every point in life, at every age, young people face challenges, and they need to learn how to master those successfully. And that means we build in them the inner strengths, and we provide the additional support by caring adults and help them develop these personal strengths so that they can be successful young people with a strong sense of self-worth.
Our resilience is like our ability to bounce back under stress. And like any rope or lifeline, its strength comes from a number of smaller, weaker strands bound together to form one strong rope. This model is similar to the concept Larry Brentro has developed to foster resilience in youth, which he calls the circle of courage.
Larry, I understand that your research into resilience has led you to study the upbringing of Native Americans.
Well, actually, it worked the other way around. We began by looking at how Native Americans raised Indians, because it was clear how they raised their children, because it was clear that they knew how to create respectful, radiantly happy children without, abusive kinds of treatment. And so that led to a model which we call the Circle of Courage. We did that because a graphic, a medicine wheel in a circle drawn by Lakota artist George Bluebird, portrays the four directions or the four concepts beginning with belonging in the East, if you think of these as four directions, mastery, independence, and generosity.
And so how do these interrelate to making youth resilient?
Well, if we think from a point of view of a young child, it's absolutely essential that a youngster has this belonging, this attachment, this nurturing at the beginning. Everything is based on that. And then children who belong, who attach to caregivers and teachers, then are able to learn, to master from those people. And as you get the skills, both academically and socially and in other ways, you're able then to become more independent and to take charge of your life and to control yourself and to act responsibly and delay gratification. And then finally, to have everything in balance, you need to reach out to other people, to be a caring person who's generous, concerned about other people. And so we say that a healthy young person has this circle in balance. But if the circle is broken at any point in time, then we have a whole range of problems and pathologies and risks.
And it's not good enough just to have one strong part of the circle, you must have all four?
Yeah, they're all essential. For example, kids who don't belong feel alienated. Kids who don't master, they fail in school, they feel frustrated. Children who aren't independent by definition are either needing somebody to control them or they have a pseudo-independence, nobody tells me what to do. And then children who don't care about others, that they create a lot of problems for other people and they have no sense to their life. You see, ultimately, our life makes sense, gives us meaning and purpose as we contribute to others. And so that's why in a small list of 4 ideas, it really summarizes very well what all humans need to live on this earth in harmony. By the way, not only children, because this applies at every age of through adolescence and adulthood and even in old age. If you live long enough, your circle will be broken. They'll take you away from the people you love and you won't be able to master and take care of yourself and contribute.
The 4 values encompassed by the Circle of Courage are belonging, mastery, independence, and generosity. The first one of those, belonging, is all about our need to feel part of a community. Many people think that we've lost our sense of community living this hectic modern day lifestyle that we do. If we feel part of a community, we feel important. We form powerful bonds that prevent us from those at-risk behaviours. We spoke to social researcher Gary Hopkins.
Gary, how does a sense of belonging relate to our resilience in coping with life?
Well, first of all, resilience is more or less, or actually specifically defined as the capacity to maintain competent functioning in the face of major life stressors. It's kind of like a ball. If you put a ball into the ocean and the waves are 5 meters tall, the ball floats. If the waves get 50 meters tall, the ball floats. It may poke under the water, but it continues to float. Some people do well in spite of the odds, and they seem to float no matter what happens. If you look at children of alcoholics who don't become alcoholics, or sexually abused kids who don't become sexual abusers, or in any fashion, look at resilient people. What you see is that they become resilient mostly or most often because someone has stepped up in their life to make a difference. Someone has befriended them. Someone has attached themselves to them who had values, who then walked with them. And it's a very subtle thing, but who's walked with them through the turbulence. It doesn't make them perfect. It makes them better. And it's that relationship or the sense of belonging with somebody with values that tends to save them. There's actually some pretty neat research done on community that tends to predict resilience. There's a gentleman from Northern California who looks at students' perception of their school as a community. And he asks some questions like, do you like school? Do people care about you at school? Do they help you at school? Are they concerned about you even if they don't know you? And have those things, and they have a high perception of their school as a community. They read more on their own, they like school more, they do math better, they go to school more often, they have higher self-esteem, they tend to have better learning styles, they tend to make more long-term plans, they take fewer drugs. It makes them better. And so community really is part of what makes people resilient. There's very good research on both of those things.
I understand there is a town that you've studied that illustrates the power of community. Could you tell us about it?
There's a town up in Idaho, a small town, and I'm interested in small towns, having lived in Montana. And in that town, they had typical small town problems. They had girls getting pregnant and kids drinking and using drugs, et cetera. So the town got together and said, what should we do? And so they said, let's do whatever it takes. And they hired the expensive teen pregnancy prevention programs and drug prevention programs, alcohol prevention programs, and after about 5 years, they got together and learned that the kids enjoyed it, they knew more, but nothing had changed. The behaviors were the same. So they re-met and said, what are we gonna do? And some old, smart old guy, I'm sure much smarter than I, said, you know, when I was a kid, everybody knew each other around here and we didn't do those kinds of things, and said, why don't we just get to know these kids, let's learn their names. So the whole town went on a campaign to learn the first name of every kid in town, and with that, relationships started, and with that, kids started spending more time with adults, and with that, the rates of teen pregnancy dropped, alcohol use dropped, and drug use dropped.
So we're trying to build a bridge between young people and their community. How often have you heard a young person described only in negative terms? A tearaway, up to no good, a troublemaker. Imagine what these labels do to a person's self-esteem. The second point in the circle of courage is about identifying young people's talents and developing them. And this means finding out their talents and acknowledging their strengths so they can value themselves.
You know, mastery isn't, ha, I'm better than you. You know, mastery is developing what potentials, what strengths, what talents a young person has. And we believe it's essential to be on a talent hunt with all young people, to find their genius, to assume that they have that, and to have every young person in whatever areas they can develop their potentials. And then as young people have skills, they have a kind of an obligation to share those skills with someone else. That creates a more powerful environment, you know, where together every person is achieving what they want. And in the broader sense, whatever life problems we face, young people need these skills to cope with them in an adaptive way, in a positive way, in a problem-solving way, rather than come apart at times of stress and get into negative behavior. A lot of the negative behavior that, for example, we see in schools results from kids who have felt, I'm going to fail, I'm no good at this, I'm not intelligent. And that's our job, to help find the genius inside every kid.
So Larry, identifying the strengths of children is something very powerful that adults can do?
Yes, and I think particularly with young people who are known for their failures, you know, who are seen as not having talents. And the job really becomes even to see in problem behavior potential strength. I mean, a gang leader is a leader. A clown, you know, is a comedian. And sometimes by glancing at problems, we can then gaze at strengths and focus, you know, on the resources that young people have. And that's our obligation, is to help cultivate those strengths in young people.
So there is something we can do. Helping to identify and then acknowledging young people's skills and abilities will make them feel proud of what they have to offer. The third point in the circle of courage is independence. If we encourage young people to make decisions, solve problems, and show personal responsibility, then we help to grow their self-worth and their self-confidence. We spoke to Andrew Fuller, and he talked about independence and autonomy.
Just recently I was talking to a young man who was commenting about his parents, and he was saying, I'm 16, but my parents always treat me as a 6-year-old, and they've treated me like a 6-year-old for years and years and years, and they're surprised when finally I get a bit of freedom that I make 6-year-old decisions. So often parents really overload their kids with either too many words or too much protection, and they actually rob them of the option of actually developing resilience and independence. Now, independence is a funny kind of word. In fact, I don't really kind of believe in it. Most of the people that I see that are truly successful in life are interdependent. They're actually people that relate well to others. They're people that connect, they have a sense of belonging, and they develop relationships in which there's collaboration rather than competitiveness. We know that children basically are driven in times of friendship and in times of threat by a couple of different tendencies. Boys particularly, I find, get into this fight-flight kind of response, and they kind of try to work out which one of those they're going to do. Girls, when they're under stress, more often tend towards relating to others, relying on others, so they're perhaps more easily equipped for the interdependence, whereas boys sometimes need to learn how to rely and relate on others and call upon other people's resources. Girls at other times need to learn how to rely on their own resources, how to follow their own voice.
The fourth point in the circle of courage is generosity. In helping others, youth can realise that they have the power to make a positive contribution to another human life, and in doing so create proof of their own worthiness. Randall Peterson is a youth crisis counsellor and founder of Life by Design.
You know, one of the most interesting experiences for me working with people in crisis, especially younger people in crisis, was a focus on teaching them how to give. The magic in just giving, just that very act of giving, sharing of yourself or giving someone else something, there's a magical quality in that. And that I don't presume to be able to define. There's just something that feels good about it. But for me, what was a little more tangible in their experience of giving was when they gave, they actually experienced someone else appreciating their gift, their time, their gestures, whatever it was that they gave. The person they gave it to usually appreciated that. And that was where it kind of started to snowball for some of these guys, because when they sensed that someone appreciated what they had to offer, automatically up went their sense of worth, because if someone appreciates what I'm giving, there has to be worth in what I'm giving, and I guess the logical progression is if there's worth in what I'm giving, I'm worthwhile. You know, because when we start to give and practice that as a part of our life, you only flourish as a person when you do give. For example, anyone in business or retail, they only flourish because they're offering a service that's of use to someone else. And in our own personal lives, in our communities, in our relationships only flourish because people give. I mean, if people didn't give, it wouldn't work. And it's that cycle of life where we give. And then the more you practice giving, the more it actually teaches you how to be generous. And I make a distinction between giving and generosity, because sometimes people can give and learn how to give, but then there seems to be a point where it actually turns itself into generosity, where the motivation seems to be so pure and so others-orientated. And, you know, when we think of the great people in life, and how they achieved their status in life as a result of giving, and giving completely selfishly and giving solely for the need of others. And it's love, put in other words, I guess. That's essentially what we're talking about. Learning to love in your relationships, learning to love in the way you carry yourself, because love is essentially about giving, and giving generously. Giving without conditions placed on it, and that was really nice watching some of the guys I worked with grow, because there was this ulterior motive at the outset that giving is going to make me feel good, but it's just so neat to see people learning to give, forming a habit of giving, and then that giving becoming part of their life. And that turning into just natural generosity, just a way of being. And the things that people have experienced in return, just because of giving, has been absolutely immeasurable.
Building a child or a young person's sense of self-worth is where adults play a valuable role in building resilience.
We all need to believe we're valued by others in order to value ourselves. So whether you're a parent, a teacher, a friend, we can all have an influence by giving positive feedback.
Actually, Alan, you're pretty good at what you do. No, you are. I'm being serious. You're very good.
Thanks, Kylie. You're fantastic too.
Well, we just make a good team. Now, where were we?
To find out more about how a significant adult can play a role in any child's life, we spoke to Ian Grant.
Ian, how important is it for a child to have a significant adult in their life?
Jonathan, I think it's very important because simply for a boy at the age of 4, he becomes a male role-seeking missile. I mean, he just has to have a male role model in his life. For a girl, it's very interesting too because her dad is the first male she ever gave her heart to, so he has a significant place to play. A lot of boys today operate behind masks, and it's simply at the age of 14 they get a message, you're a protector provider, but because there are marshmallows inside, they don't know how to do that. And we're the only culture that doesn't have an initiation ceremony for both boys and girls, where they are told, hey, you're going to become an adult. And so male role models or adult role models are just vital. And I think the greatest thing parents can do, for instance, we made a discipline of this, that when we had guests at our table, our children were allowed to engage our guests in conversation, not dominate the conversation, but engage them, because that's how they learn to interact with adults. And in fact, during your teenage years, it's vital because an adolescent is individuating, and that is simply bumping up against adults. That's how you learn to be an adult. So I think it's tragic. Some homes you go and visit and the children are having their meal over here and the teenagers are watching television and the adults are having a talk around the table. So I think that's very, very important to do that. The more you can expose your children to excellent role models, the better it is, because it's a sort of a cross-pollination that happens and it inspires them. I've got a lovely story of a single mum whose husband died, and she had a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old boy, and she had heard me say, you know, that the boy becomes a role model seeking missile at 4. And I'd come up with some research that if a boy can be in a normal family once a month for a meal table where there's a dad, it exposes him to how dads operate, so he learns how to be a man. And her little son Joshy was 5, and he was going for his normal meal once a month. And in the conversation, the dad shared that a stool had got broken. So little Joshy 5 said to him, I'll fix that stool for you. And being a great dad, he said, Joshua, thank you, that'd be great. And of course, she freaked out. She arrived for Joshy because this broken stool. What's he going to do? So she was a smart mum. She went to a hardware shop and she said to the guy there, don't fix it for me, tell me how to fix it. So he explained it. Went in the garage, 2 hours later they had a stool. She said, you should have seen my Joshy's chest when he gave this man the stool.
What about girls?
I think girls naturally do it because they are, you know, boys will never stop a game if the relationships break down. Girls will stop a game if relationships break down. So girls need relationships, so they'll naturally find that. And often it's important for a mother to allow her friends to be involved in her daughter's life, because you know, that friend you can go and talk about what mum's done, and the friend says, well, I think she's a good mum and I'd have done that to my daughter. You know, I think that's very, very important to have those relationships. And I just encourage people who are a sports coach, you are influencing society like you would never know. And it's very important. And girls' relationships are everything. So the more adults a girl is exposed to who are good role models, the more rounded a person she will be.
Are there techniques that we should learn in order to become a significant adult in a child's life?
Well, just little things. I jog every morning. And one day I thought, man, it's important for the boys I pass, the paper boys, to say good morning. And how are you, mate? And it's interesting. On my jog, every time I pass a young guy, I just say to him, g'day, how you doing? And one morning I passed a whole lot of schoolboys waiting for a bus, and they're all looking cool, and here's this grey-headed old guy jogging past them. I said, morning, boys, how are you? And they said, I'm well, thank you, sir. The whole lot answered me. And I think just for, you know, it's the old animal thing. The big lion noticed the young cubs there, and it's appreciated. And I'm passing it on to my friends, and they're doing it. And I think because there's stranger danger, a lot of men resist doing it. And I think, hey, I live a clean life, I'm going to do it.
As we heard earlier in the program from Tracy, it takes just one person to believe in you to inspire change.
And we can all play a role. Whether it's someone in the family, a student, someone we know in a community group, we all have something to offer.
Exactly. We all build resilience as a group. We can help to prevent these young people from falling into those at-risk behaviours.
And challenge yourself. How resilient are you? In times of crisis, are you managing? What can you do to build more resilience in your own life?
We're going to leave you with those thoughts, but first I'd like to thank everyone who helped with the program today.
Yeah, thanks for listening. See you again.
See ya.